stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Earls? Here. Mr. Beistel? Here. Mr. Carson?
Here.
Mr. Cron?
Here.
Mr. Malakowski?
Here.
Mr. Porter?
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes? Here. Mrs. Smith? Here. Mrs. Love?
Here. I need a motion. First of all, we had executive session and we talked about a personnel matter. I need a motion to suspend the rules for the solicitor to do a presentation.
Out of order. Before my normal time to
Okay.
do my report, it would be a PowerPoint.
Mrs. Smith makes a motion, second. All in favor or roll call?
Just voice vote.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Tonic, you have the
Okay.
floor.
Okay.
Are we going down?
Yeah.
Okay.
when Mr. Turnley was here, and on some other occasions. The statute is called Act 141 of 2012, Financial Recovery for School Districts. It has some introductory sections that would allow for greater use of education management services, and also had a section dealing with some additional requirements for school superintendent's contracts, which are not the subject for tonight. Several sections repeal older sections relating to what were called distressed school districts. That's the older terminology that people like Mr. Porter and I would have been familiar with from previous years, and replaces them in Section 10 and adds Article 6A to the school code. So that makes it 24 PS 6-6 whatever it is, 600 something, and then has a capital A at the end, if you look that up in Purdon statutes. The statute contains detailed criteria which may make school districts eligible for a declaration of financial recovery, even though they are currently paying bills. One provision would take effect as soon as the Secretary of Education promulgated some additional regulations. That's already occurred. It contains more encouragement towards pushing to privatize in some areas, in some instances. It is still legal to use the general fund balance of the school district to, quote, balance the budget. But using the fund balance is not a revenue in the sense of new monies, and thus does not meet a formula for defining deficit for purposes of financial recovery declaration and potential appointment of a chief recovery officer. So even though the basic school code does permit school districts to use their monies from the general fund budget, it can be a problem in the area of looking at specific criteria, specific tests contained within the statute and the regulation. It gives extensive powers to the Chief Recovery Officer and specifically retains limitations of Special Session Act 1, limitations on tax increases. We had talked about that in the past, about you have the index and you have the ability to seek certain exceptions to the referendum. The most pertinent one was that the school district approved based upon their expenditures for special education in the past. But otherwise, you have to go to a referendum. So it doesn't give any new powers there to exceed the requirements of that statute. It establishes an early warning system to put school districts on financial watch. The Secretary has promulgated standards that would require them to compile financial data, notify school districts, and offer technical assistance. There are currently 5 school districts in that category. The problem is that the school district could potentially, any school district, could theoretically avoid financial watch and still fall or slip into financial recovery declaration. It creates new statutory definitions for revenue and expenditures and also the word deficit. Here are those definitions. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but the important thing here about deficit, the excess of expenditures over revenues. Expenditures are reductions in fund equity, including current operating expenses that require the use of fund equity, debt service, and capital outlays. The term shall not include interfund transfers. Now, what that means is, for the purpose of this statute, if you're about to reach the threshold or the Secretary is looking at filing a declaration, even though a school district may have what they feel are legitimate and prior to this statute would not have been questioned, reasons to use fund balance to do a one-time project, to spend money for a capital outlay. And on the theory that, well, this is something that is why you have a fund balance, to try to cover something that comes up that you would really like to not have to borrow for, save interest, etc. Well, being a good steward in that sense now becomes a problem because it brings it into the definition for one of these particular sections that we're going to be talking about. And then revenues are additions to fund equity other than from inter-fund transfers, proceeds of debt, and proceeds of disposition of general fixed assets. It applies to all school districts except the school districts of Philadelphia. They have their own criteria. The first two categories don't apply to us. Those with average daily membership above 7,500 students, and any school district which receives advances in basic ed subsidy and is already, at the time of that statute, subject to financial distress under the older Section 691. Or, if you had the audacity to sue the Commonwealth and seek greater financial assistance. The statute provides that not more than 9 school districts may be under declaration of financial recovery status at any one time under this section or in receivership under subdivision B1, which we'll get to later. One problem is, does this mean 9 in each category or 9 in the aggregate? So far, there are currently 6. Penn Hills is the latest. They had Financial Watch in June 2017 and a financial declaration in January 2019, and they've been in the newspaper at various times. They had a huge construction project that went unbelievably over budget. They probably had other problems too, but that continuously gets talked about. School district financial recovery. The Secretary may consider in determining whether to issue a declaration that a school district is in financial recovery status and whether moderate or severe. The moderate category applies to one of those earlier definitions that I gave you. So you're either severe or you're not going forward for school districts in all the other school districts in the Commonwealth. I'm not going to go through each one of these criteria. I'm trying to picking out ones that seem to have the possibility of possibly being a problem for us in the future. The school district's unreserved fund balance has declined for 3 consecutive years and is less than 5% of the school district's annual expenditures. Regulation defines it as unreserved fund balance means the school district's unassigned fund balance. When the state legislature passed this statute, they apparently forgot that they already changed some terminology from unreserved to a new category of unassigned. So the regulation was put out and cleaned up that problem from their point of view. Because a financial recovery is defined as deficits, even for perceived one-time reasons, and are paid from and reduce the fund balance, they are still considered in the 3-year test part of item B. So you have 3 consecutive years at least where you've had declines in the unreserved fund balance. You don't get a break because you used money to pay for a capital project out of cash. And you then go beneath the 5% of annual expenditures floor. So we have an 8% ceiling. We've talked about that before. Mr. Turnley was here. We have, in this example, a 5% floor. So constantly keeping school districts tightly constrained in the long run, although in the short run, there are still problems. There are many other categories which I'm not going to spend time on this page. I'm going to go to the next page. We're not at that category. The school district's assigned and unassigned total fund balance is less than 0 in the school district's general fund. The next page has some relevancy. The school district's assigned and unassigned total fund balance in the school district's general fund as a percentage of total expenditures is less than 3%. I don't believe we've met that test yet, but it would be something to watch in the future. Item N, the school district has accumulated and operated with a deficit equal to at least 2% of the assessed valuation of the taxable real estate within the school district for 2 successive years. We have met the definition of operating with a deficit. However, the statute, neither the statute nor the regulations tell us how to adjust for the fact of 2 county school districts, of which there are, I forget the exact number, 11 or 12 in the state. Because there has to be an adjustment because the assessments into 2 counties, Westmoreland and Fayette, are not the same. So I haven't figured out how to do this. I'm trying to find out, but I couldn't do the math for it. You could, except it uses the words assessment, and that's part of my problem. It doesn't say that. I just hit a wrong button here. Where's my... and that would probably make the most sense of the way to do that. So if we did use that as an example, we could do a calculation. Obviously, if the school district meets one of the above criteria, will the secretary necessarily act if you only meet one? I can't predict. So far, they've been looking at people with really a lot of problems. Penn Hills, Harrisburg has been in it, I think, since the inception. York County Suburban, and several other school districts. I'm not sure. I think maybe one has come out. But the situation here is that even though we know what the criteria are, we can't have a perfect predictability as to when the secretary will exercise his or her discretion and decide that it's time to do something. Now, this page is trying to bring this to current situation, and I'm sorry it's so tiny. I was trying to get a lot of information and do a calculation on this page. I tried to set up the basic problem in using the statute, and then I asked for some assistance and some numbers from Mr. Marnell, and he assisted me with that and updated it some more. This is the 3-year unassigned fund balance test as to whether you are going to go below 5% of your expenditures. And the idea is to test it on the current 2019-2020, and then at some point in the future, it would take an awful lot of math, which I can't do a 2021 projected usable assigned fund balance and maintenance of the 5% floor with additional considerations that might be relevant. So what's happened here is you started the year in January with a preliminary budget for the first time in the history of the school district, and it was above $32 million. We went through that process. It was approved, paperwork sent to Harrisburg. As we have progressed into the school year, eventually we have a draft budget which has a date of 4/11 on it, but it actually wasn't officially presented to the school board to become a public docket until more recently. Those numbers for the early retirements and unfortunately the situation with the professional care assistants, those numbers then were subtracted out of that. So you get to a situation where you have a $31,356,975 proposed expenditures as of tonight at the start of the meeting. The revenue for that was $30,549,000. So you have a draft deficit in that first column, line 23, $807,950. Now, it is possible that people could make different projections. That's fine if they are, approved, if they are thought through, and as long as the assumptions are stated so that everybody knows where we are. So as not to lose sight of the protection I'm trying to give you here. The middle column, or the column number 1, unassigned fund balance increase, unfortunately there are decreases. 16-17 is a decrease, $535,000. 17-18 actual, it's now actual, is $1,082,000. And the 18-19 that was passed last year was planned at $323,371. Now, again, it's possible that the actual outcome of that could be better, could be worse, but we have to start with some numbers and start projecting some things to have a target, because if you don't have a target, you can't come up with a plan. Your unassigned fund balance at the end of 17-18 was $2,626,000. You used in column 3, $323,000 for the unassigned fund balance to, quote, balance your budget under the standard definition. And that then leaves you a UFB, an unassigned fund balance of $2,303,299. Your 5% floor of the $31 million number is $1,567,000 in column 5. The difference between column 4 and column 5 is in column 6, maximum usable unassigned fund balance. Column previous 4 minus current 5 is $735,450. That is less than your draft deficit of $807,950. So if the school board does nothing and nothing else changes, you are you subtract the 735 from the 807, and you're $72,500 under your floor. Everybody's being paid. Nobody's, investigators aren't coming in. Looks like you're operating normal. But if you do nothing, you meet the test. Okay? So my point is that the school board understands that the administrators understand it, employees understand it, everybody understands it. So once again, if all you do is try to move money from the unassigned fund balance to cover this, you're already got a problem. Now, I already anticipate or hope or pray that the school board is planning, because I know it's on the budget or the agenda tonight, to discuss additional cuts. I don't know if that's the beginning or the end. I hope that the school board can deal with this problem and come to a satisfactory conclusion. My main point here is that you can't use all of that $807,000, because you're exposing yourself to having met the test. If you have a deficit this year, it goes over to the next year, and it creates the potential for doing it again. So it could become a running problem. You might have the opportunity to intercept and interrupt the problem this year by stopping the 3 consecutive years and not breaching the 5% floor. I had a discussion in public. I'm changing my mind about it. I had that brief discussion with Mr. Turnley about whether or not to take some of the unassigned fund balance and assign it. I've come to the conclusion that's just going to create more problems than it's going to solve. But what I am doing is saying mentally to the school board and our officials that you really sort of don't have all of that unassigned fund balance available, even if you didn't have the 5% problem, because you're already committed to paying the ERIPS into the future. And in the past, you don't have, you set aside monies to always cover those. Unfortunately, if you do that now, you will lower your unassigned fund balance and already be beneath the 5% floor. So this has to be fiscal discipline of constantly putting an asterisk by your minimum number so that you don't run out of money for things that you've already obligated yourselves for. That's the way I view it now. You may disagree with it. I hope I at least have given you a reasonable explanation. The Commonwealth shall ensure the delivery of effective educational services to all students enrolled who are in financial recovery. It's undefined. It doesn't specifically excuse lack of AYP or all the testings that you have to do. So it doesn't say anything about other areas that are not literally educational services. Sports, band, stuff like that, that we all value. Theoretically, a financial recovery officer, they're called a chief recovery officer, or a receiver, they don't have to agree with that. Fixed costs are defined by the regs now. I'm not sure that that's a problem for us that I thought it might be, so I'm not spending time on it. It's one of those other tests. Now, the school districts, if the secretary issues a declaration of financial recovery, school directors are to remain in office and resignations are prohibited, except with the consent of the chief recovery officer, I call him the CRO, or receiver, which is a higher, more even authoritarian figure, and shall remain in office unless removed for neglect of duty or elected or appointed to an incompatible position. They must perform any duties delegated to them by the chief recovery officer and must comply with any directive issued to them. The powers and duties of the CRO are to develop a recovery plan, coordinate, maintain oversight, attend regular and executive sessions of the Board of School Directors. The school district is required to provide records and information, can direct employees or appointed officials in writing to furnish answers to questions, can petition common police court for mandamus, which is a specific kind of court order ordering and directing someone who would not have discretion, and the court would not have discretion if the requirements are met about whether or not to issue the order. May hold public meetings, may conduct private negotiation sessions with individual creditors, contains both broad and some specific requirements. I covered that before. I repeated that. Apologize. The plan may include any of the following recommendations for eliminating deficits, balancing the budget, avoiding future deficits, making payments, proposing a reduction of debts due on specific claims, small I, changes in permanent and temporary staffing levels, changes in organization, and then possibly sales or the application for a loan under the Financial Recovery Transitional Loan Program, which is the only benefit that I can see of being in this situation. An analysis of whether functional consolidation or privatization of existing non-instructional or other school services is feasible. Recommendations for state projections of revenues and expenditures for the current year +2, which is maybe something we should start doing. State benchmarks and timelines for restoring financial recovery and establish specific criteria to satisfy the secretary to terminate. additional powers and duties in relation to the financial recovery plan will affect needed economies by reopening its budget, converting school buildings to charter schools, cancel or renegotiate any contract. If it will affect needed economies, there's a different section for collective bargaining agreements. Additionally, you can be ordered to increase taxes. Your only weapons are persuasion. You can't refuse. If you refuse to follow the plan, then you go into the next level, which is receivership. Dispense with services of non-professional employees, enter into agreements with nonprofits, negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement if it will affect needed economies. A collective bargaining agreement after the financial recovery plan may not violate, expand, or diminish the provisions of an existing FRP. That's a repeat, I'm sorry. Here's receivership. The Secretary of Education has to file a petition if they've issued a declaration and then the school board fails to approve the financial recovery plan or fails to comply with it or satisfy the objectives, or the school board itself could ask to be put into receivership. I admit I don't know why they would do that. Extensive provisions on procedures as to who is appointed and how. I'm not going to go through those. I'm not going to go through all the procedures, but the court can order, the secretary issues a declaration. It can be about 3 pages long. I looked at Penn Hills. 3 pages. The school district then has the burden to overcome those allegations. It's put on show cause, so it has the burden of proof. So if you go into court as a school district, you have the burden of proof to show why the secretary is wrong, that you didn't meet those tests, and show that the filing is arbitrary, capricious, or wholly irrelevant to restoring district to financial stability. I know of no one who successfully fought these school districts. The receiver then assumes all the powers and duties of the Chief Recovery Officer and the Board of School Directors, including all powers and duties of the school directors in the FRP, except to levy and raise taxes as provided. The board shall levy and raise taxes as directed. They're engaging in a fiction. They're saying that the receiver can't raise the taxes, but the receiver orders the school board to do it, and the school board has to do it. The Chief Recovery Officer remains as an advisor. The receiver can also implement the plan, direct employees and officials to take actions, direct the board to levy and raise the taxes, that's number 5, and then modify the financial recovery plan by petition of court or other similar powers that was originally entered into with the Chief Recovery Officer. Again, the fiction. Can't unilaterally raise taxes, but you can't exceed the Act 1 index. That stays in place. Can't modify bonds, except as may be ordered by a court. I don't know how the court gets that authority under the statute. It doesn't appear to exist. They can suspend the authority of the elected and appointed officials of the school district to exercise power on behalf of the school district pursuant to law, charter, resolution, ordinance, rule, or regulation, except as directed by the receiver. I interpret this to mean that the school board gets left with all the difficult stuff of doing student expulsion hearings and employee terminations and things that aren't pleasant, to make that kind of a decision, perhaps. I'm not even sure of that. Termination, at least 3 years, and for 1 or more extensions. And then there's a transition period for 5 years for the secretary to oversee. I'm not sure if there's been one termination. I'm operating on some distant memory. So once you get in it, it's hard to get out of. Here's the one benefit if you cooperate with the declaration and the financial plan. You can get a no interest loan. It's sort of one-time shot in the arm to try to cover things while you move forward with a plan. If you don't cooperate, you don't get the no interest loan. If there's conflict between this and other provisions of law, this one will prevail. Bankruptcy is prohibited under state law. So even then, you can't declare bankruptcy and get the protections from federal court. I'm sorry, this is such fine print. I'm not going to go through it. This is the actual backup for declaring a situation that is called financial watch. You typically, a school district would be put on financial watch before going into having a declaration of financial recovery. There are some introductory definitions which really relate to things about how much debt you have and how poor you are, and it seems to work against poorer school districts. It definitely works against school districts with higher debt. They look at fund balance ratio, borrowing base capacity, debt ratio, advanced BEFs. If you've had a bond intercept, that's a real no-no. That means you haven't paid your bonds, and the bondholder goes to the Secretary of Education and can demand that they get paid ahead of everybody else. They also look at market value, personal income aid ratio, and I think we typically are in the very high, like 59% or somewhere around there. So we might already qualify in that sense. Poorer school districts do. And other definitions here. And then they can also look at the actual criteria in that we already went through, those different criteria, including the 5% floor and those others. So that is my explanation, and I thought it was important that try to pull all that information together so that going forward there's a better understanding of why I am so nervous about this statute. Thank you. Good night.
I would like to compliment all you that come here week after week and sit in those seats, because that is a tough situation.
Ready?
Yeah.
Citizens' comments?
I'm sorry. Austin Hodge.
I'm sorry, I didn't know Mr. Carson wasn't here.
This thing on this time? Oh, good. First, I'd like to apologize for my tirade last week. My nerves were very racked. I was pressed for time as my mother was hurting and I needed to get out of here very fast. So I'd like to apologize if I was insulting last week. That being said, I did notice something that was a bit depressing last week. When I was speaking, I might be wrong, but when I was speaking, I noticed that only one of you seemed to be attentive, Mr. Masha. I thank you for that, for putting in the time and effort to seem like you care. You have nothing but respect for me, and I wish I could say that for all of you. I've been going to Southmoreland since 8th grade. I've learned so much from this school and the teachers here. I'll forever be grateful for the things I've learned. From STEM classes to AP classes, each one has given me something to take with me as I go on in my life. Admittedly, being a student, I never paid attention to the budget up until now. I came to school, I learned, and I went home. This year is when I started to pay more attention, because all I kept hearing about was cuts, cuts, and more cuts. Then I heard that you were not only cutting the special education program, but you were outsourcing too. I am not a special needs student, but I do understand that those students deserve the best our school can offer. They do not deserve to be thought of as a second-class student or even afterthoughts. Even if that wasn't your intention, that's what you've made them. You've made not only those students feel less important, but the teachers and the parents as well. You've hurt people. It's not right under any circumstance. If you're going to give us a story about how you don't want to cut special education and how you're heartbroken that you have to outsource, we have a right to know what you did to try and avoid cutting it. May I remind you that in every school, it's promised that there will be a high-quality education for all. Yet, you're cutting programs that will provide them with that quality. I understand that a budget needs to be responsible, but quite frankly, you're not being responsible with the budget. I decided to start taking a deeper dive into the budget, and I was not pleased with what I saw. First, you don't list how many students are in the school district or the cost per student. You're one of 3 school districts in the entire county of Westmoreland that does that. It's very upsetting and very unnerving. You've promised transparency, but you still haven't released that information. All you have is how much it costs for instructional and special education as a whole so far. I would like to know you are spending $19 million on those services, but I would also like to know, and I think the good people and taxpayers of this school district would like to know the specifics of where their money is going. You talk about this area being poor, but you cut such things that are necessities. To my understanding, you've cut the activity buses, something that are very important for a rural region where people don't always have cars and don't always have a ride home and live very far away from the school. How much are you spending on cyber schools? How much are you spending on textbooks? Obviously not much because they're falling apart or we just simply don't have enough. Are you negotiating prices with vendors? Are you providing a school-based cyber school program? Are you focusing on digital education? Or quite frankly, are you stuck in the past thinking that textbooks will suffice? Google Classroom is here, but it's not encouraged. It's been 4 years of constant cuts, and the budget has only gotten worse. In the 2014-2015 year, about $200,000 in deficit.
You
The
have 30
following
seconds. You have 30 seconds.
Okay, I see. Well, before you start cutting and outsourcing, you all need to take a good, hard look at the specifics. If you can't, then we need to find people who can and who will.
Michelle Williams?
Michelle Williams. I live at 208 North Chestnut Street. I'm going to try to get through this without crying. But I just want to say something first. We watched several of you walk across here in almost a laughing manner after that presentation. And we're all sitting back here almost crying. So I just want to say that that was unacceptable. I also want to say this is probably what my children mean by mixed signals when they were growing up, because an auditor comes in here and paints this horrible picture. We're all painting a horrible picture with cuts. And our business manager stood right in this position last week and said, "We are not in trouble." And then we just had this presentation for over a half hour. I'm kind of confused. I don't know. But as elected members of this school board, you receive recommendations from 3 people: the superintendent, who makes recommendations based on educational needs of the district; the solicitor makes his recommendations based upon the law; and the business manager should be making recommendations based upon what is in the best financial interest of this district. Ultimately, it is your job to take that information and make decisions that affect our district. Many of us are asking ourselves how we got to this point. Where did things go wrong? Most people are now saying taxes should have been raised yearly to meet the rising cost in pension, salaries, and simply rising costs of running the district. In order to be a district where taxes are not continually being raised, our community needs to be growing in population, new homes, double-income families. Our community, sadly, is not growing, yet the families that are here still deserve quality education for their children. Following last week's meeting, I requested a copy of the business manager's contract. Just taking a quick look at that contract, it is very apparent that his judgment is certainly clouded when making recommendations. He receives an incentive if taxes are not raised. Maybe on the surface, this looks like a good plan. However, if you continue to take money from the savings in order to meet the reoccurring expenses, it does not make good business sense. These incentives in his contract range from $2,500 a year to $10,000 a year, depending upon how many years in a row we go without a tax increase. I question how this money is paid to him. Is it paid his salary, or is it paid separately? Because this could also affect his pension. So basically, we are paying an incentive to the business manager to balance the budget without raising taxes, so long as he does not allow the fund balance to drop below $2 million. It's like being a nurse and receiving a bonus if I keep my patient alive, as long as I do not give meds or blood products if they're bleeding out. I've researched many other contracts in the county, including his first contract, and that clause is not in any other business manager's contract that I can find. I completely disagree with these incentives. You as a board should never put something outlandish in a contract with the assumption that it will never come true. The unbelievable happens all the time. My son was a 26-weeker weighing 840 grams, which is less than 2 pounds, and he is reading at the same level as other first graders. So miracles do happen, and if all those incentives were paid out, it would have cost this district $25,000 and a $10,000 increase in the salary of the last year of his contract. My question becomes, is he making the best possible recommendations for our district? Take, for example, in the year 17-18, where there's no tax increase, but we deplete the fund balance by $2 million. So I want to know how much the business manager was paid in incentives. I want to know who negotiated this outlandish contract. There are only 2 attachments to this contract, one labeled Exhibit A, and the one is not labeled at all. There's no way to even tell if page 13 truly belongs to the contract. Shouldn't it be initialed or something, signed by all parties maybe? The business manager contract was signed in 2013, does not include these incentives. That contract had 13 sections. The current contract has 26 sections, many of them covering the business manager from any legal wrongdoing. My question is, why are we needing to protect him from wrongdoing? Why would we agree to not hold him accountable for any of his actions? In my opinion, a contract is to protect both parties. The current business manager contract does nothing to protect the district.
30 seconds.
My point to all this is you cannot trust anyone. Last week, a statement was made regarding a previous comment I made. My statement was that I find it appalling that the business manager had missed 2 meetings during the budget discussions that were leading to major cuts. I stand by those comments. The business manager is the person that can best answer questions pertaining to the budget. In the position description, which is listed as Exhibit A, number 20 states, attend all board meetings. So unlike the rest of us that take time out to be here, the business manager is legally obligated to be here.
Catherine Fike?
I am sick at heart after hearing Mr. Patonik's presentation, and I want to thank him for that. I was sick when I left here after last week's so-called budget meeting. There's an old saying, when you really can't solve a problem, you simply rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. And that's exactly what happened. So to produce a beautifully balanced budget for Southmoreland, all you did was take an unbalanced budget, go through it, and change the numbers. Shazam, problem solved. I refer you to page 5 of the current business manager's agreement with Southmoreland School District. I'm sure you all have it. It's under the category Assessment of Performance. By June 30th of each year, the board shall evaluate in writing the performance of the business manager. If the board fails to do this, the business manager is scot-free. He cannot be disciplined, discharged, or charged with incompetency. One of the written purposes stated in there of either a written or a default satisfactory evaluation is, quote, to establish the basis for incremental adjustments, that would be incentives, in his annual salary. What does that mean? If the current business manager presented the board with a $32 million budget, and in addition to significant job losses and nearly $770,000 that was cut by the former business manager by changing the numbers in the original budget, does that mean that the original budget was not correctly prepared? Or was it? What if, in fact, that original budget was accurate? We shall see. Remember the auditor's report. The original budget may actually reflect the truth about our expenses versus our income. Now, how does that affect the fund balance if you're going to need to use it to pay expenses because shuffling the numbers doesn't make it come out right? Once again, and this is the third time, I am asking what has been done regarding the health care reconciliation of John Halfhill's formal public contract. Please answer me. Please answer this publicly. Do not force us to take unpleasant action at a state level. Thank you.
I believe it said District $9,000.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Calculation was done, I was told, save the district 9,000 on the basic reason that when he retired, he was husband and wife. Shouldn't say this publicly, his wife happens to be older. So when she went Medicare, he went single, saved the district $9,000 over the 6-year agreement. I know, sometimes I think when David gives these presentations that sometimes I think you're yelling fire in the theater. The district is struggling. It started to struggle when I left, and I told you this before. I wish I had a time capsule. I should have put a little letter in that time capsule, because I knew in the back of my mind what was going to happen. I mean, this district had so much money, $8 million fund balance, and I knew what was coming. A catastrophe was coming in the form of the pension system. Okay? I knew that rate was going from 5% to 38%. And it was just starting the year I left in 10-11. To give you some comparison, how this, I got to give the board credit so far trying to make up lost time. Cuts are ugly. They really are. What should have happened, and I said this before, it should have been a $2 million to pay for the pension system. Look around you. Mount Pleasant, Derry, York. I'm tired of saying it. They did it. We didn't. Okay? So my last year here in 10-11, when Christy Smith got up to speak about salaries and the salary number in the budget, the salary number for the 1920 budget is $12,656,000. In 10-11, my last year, total salaries for that budget, or no, not the budget, this is fact. This is off the annual financial report, $12,196,000. Salaries is only $460,000 more after 9 years. Pension. This year, $4,000,001, 10-11, $900,000. It's black and white, folks. That's where it's at.
Plus, we kept our school district going.
Just as a point of information, the administration and I have started the process of reviewing the calculation. We haven't finished it. Keep getting interrupted with more severe problems. But I don't believe that it's actually due or could be actually truly determined to be final because of the way the contract is written until June 30th of this year. So I don't think it's light, but it is something that's being looked into. The contract with Dr. Hoffman, because there is some math involved in that. That's all I have.
Ray Ban?
Hi, Raymond Band, 1322 West Pittsburgh Street. Tonight, I would want to talk about the permanent subs being eliminated. I'd like to talk about how that it's concerned fact that it's an illusion that we're going to approximately save $100,000 by eliminating the building subs. Did anyone take the time to research how many other offers or how much time they're actually in the building? I would say they're in there probably about 90%. They're being utilized. So in that aspect, you know, how much are we paying ESS for the other times that are not being used? The money will still be paid out regardless if we have building subs or not. We still need subs, and they still need to be paid. We have a few dedicated subs to the school in the district that want to be here. They are dependable. They know our students. They know our teachers. They are willing to take on a classroom at a moment's notice and be moved at a blink of an eye. There are no perks of being a building sub. You don't get no sick days, no benefits, no guaranteed full day or full-time positions. You never want a grade or classroom. You will be you'll be in. The only thing you know is that you're going to have a job for the day. The kids in the school get a consistent face in the buildings. The teachers know and trust these subs. Teachers are putting in the days off when they're without being filled. Today, I talked to my son. He had today 5 extra kids in his classroom because we didn't have a substitute for a class today. So, we're just combining classrooms. What if a teacher gets sick in the middle of the day or has an emergency? Who will cover this? We would just combine classrooms, like I said, and when they combined them, I've heard out there that we've put 25 plus in a room to combine classrooms. Where's the seats? Where do these kids get to go? They just, it's not safe. It's not an environment people want to be in. Why can't we just have an agreement or something and put it in the contract? You're going to have to pay subs anyway, so why can't we just look into the budget and budget that in there for them prior so we don't have to do this now? If we eliminate billing sub positions, there are subs that are dedicated to our school and district. You're not going to get that from any other subs. These ones don't want to leave, but I'm going to tell you they're not going to be here if they don't want to, I'm pretty sure. Why not keep the building subs and try to let them, the $100,000 that we're saying we're going to save is not going to be $100,000 in the long run because we're still going to have subs. So why don't we keep the ones that are dedicated to our students, the ones that are dedicated here to the school, and the teachers know them, like I said, we don't want to be combining classrooms because we don't have enough subs, especially when it's noticeable. For my kid to come home today and say that he had 5 kids he didn't know in his classroom because there wasn't enough subs. This isn't the first time it's happened. He's aware of it too. So that's what I just wanted to talk about tonight, to try to save them subs. I think, if we're going to pay them out anyway, we might as well keep the ones that want to be here and know the district well enough. Thank you.
Christy Smith?
Hi, my name's Christy Smith, 818 Parker Avenue. I actually didn't have anything planned to say today. I was kind of just going to listen and see what was going on. But after Mr. Botanic's report, my stomach literally hurts, which I'm sure yours does too, especially after the long report that we got last week. And I think the specific words used were, we are not a poor district, we are not broke. And we might not be broke, but it seems like we're getting pretty close to it. So I think that the reason people are so upset is because of the extremes that we seem to go to. We had a half an hour, 45 minutes of everything's fine, to now this week, and I'm not sure if the report was to say we're getting close to this or we might be at this. Whatever it was, it's sickening and it's scary, especially when you have people saying maybe you should send your kids somewhere else. And it's people in my immediate family, and I'm saying, actually, I'm going to try to get on the board. And it's crazy to think that it could be such extremes from week to week. So when I was looking at the agenda, the cuts, the taking away the reading teachers while adding in the Achieve 3000, which I know that's a great program. However, my understanding was that those reading teachers were trained to use that program. So if we take away the reading teachers, are there teachers capable of running that program effectively to bring back such a high cost program? Will it be worth it if we don't have the teachers who are trained to do that program? I think that in light of everything that was said by Mr. Botanic and Mr. Marnell last week, I think I would ask that the board not vote on anything tonight, even though it might seem like you have to and you're coming to a hard line of when things are due. I think with everything that was presented tonight, you can't possibly vote on these things, unless you knew this report before, which you might have. But if you didn't, I really ask that you rethink some things, because clearly we're in trouble. So I ask that you look at it again. Thanks.
Accounts, April 2019 check summary.
The board is asked to approve the April 2019 check summary.
Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Polakowski, second. Mrs. Rhodes? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Al? Yes. Mr. Beistel? Mr. Carson? Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter? Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries. 9-all.
Budget summary report for April 2019.
The board is asked to approve the April 2019 budget summary report.
Motion? Mrs. Smith, second, Mr. Fry. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Al?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Board reports. Superintendent report.
Please bear with me. There's several things I would like to discuss tonight. First of all, thank you, Mr. Patonik, for that presentation. It has been our intent to try to provide as much information as possible. That way people can make informed, responsible decisions, and I do appreciate Mr. Patonik presenting that content to you. I also I want to assure you that I do listen. Last week, it was suggested that my intent was to meet with some people and try to help individuals understand. My goal is to make sure that if we are having any type of meetings, it is done fairly and there is fair representation. So I will be working continually on that, and I do thank those individuals that are willing to step up and assist me and the board in this district. There is a possibility this evening of curtailment for the middle school reading program. And I think it's my responsibility to make sure that I present as much information as possible. So once again, an informed, responsible decision can be made. The purpose of eliminating the reading program is several-fold, and please bear with me. Currently, right now, in the middle school, every class is 40 minutes with the exception of math and language arts. And when I say language arts, I might slip into saying ELA, which is English Language Arts, so if I do, please forgive me. We currently provide that additional class time for those students. It is the administration's belief that by amending the reading program or curtailing the program, we can place that content and those standards directly back into the ELA, language arts class. We also believe that reading is not just something that should be taught in one particular class. Reading is something, reading and writing, and I'm going to go on record for saying that. Reading and writing should be cross-curricular across every content area. So it is our belief that that can be achieved by placing that content in the confines of the ELA class and also within all core curriculars, not only core, but every class. Phys ed class can do writing and reading. We're also faced with the possibility, we had, and it was mentioned, Achieve 3000. Achieve 3000 was first initially placed in the middle school. It is a program that is designed to assist students with nonfiction text. It is, in my opinion, very successful. It was successful to the point that it was implemented in the 5th grade. So I do believe that we have the capacity to bring that back, and I'm asking for consideration to bring that back to assist our students that are struggling and might need additional support, and that can be done during the confines of our SSP, which is our student support period, which we have every morning of the cycle, every day of the year. So it is my hope that we can provide that program to those students that are in need, and I do believe that the teachers can have the capacity to be able to provide the support for the students with that program. We also have a situation, currently right now we have a 6th grade reading teacher who is certified in special education, and her services can be utilized as a learning support teacher, in which we had, due to retirements, we had lost one of our valued learning support teachers. The current 7th grade reading teacher is certified in speech, and her services can be utilized at SPC, SES, and SMS as support services of the current speech teachers. And I want to go on record to note our speech teachers are wonderful individuals. I know for a fact, because I see these individuals putting massive amounts of extra time into their school day. Mrs. Smithula and Mrs. Shrum, who Mrs. Shrum is one of the retirees, they spend, I just can't tell you how much time they spend in not only assisting students, but also with all the necessary paperwork and all the other tasks involved with that. To that effect, Mrs. Smithula currently assists 74 students with speech-related services and will have the early intervention evaluations added to her caseload for the 2019-2020 school year. Mrs. Shrum assists 69 students, and the district purchases service from the WIU for 1/2 of a teacher to work with 32 students. Maximum caseloads are 65 students per teacher. Therefore, every year we are above the allowable limits for teacher speech services, and we are also placing an undue burden on those speech teachers that are working very, very hard to provide those services. Each special education monitor, the district gets cited for being out of compliance with the 65 students for the caseload. There are monies that can be designated from previous years, EITC, for enhancement of student reading comprehension, and it is the administration's belief that by providing additional services in our computer classes, such as those skills that are and maybe Mr. Ansel would probably have a better understanding of what they are, is coding and the STEM classes. Those, the state is recognizing those more as being 21st century skills that are necessary for students to be prepared for college and career readiness. So whenever we're talking about a curtailment of a reading program, I wanted to make sure that it is not just some arbitrary decision, but there are legitimate areas that we can look at in possibly covering some of our needed areas that we are losing due to our retirements. With that, please keep in mind that going hand in hand, I am asking that we create the WIU. We are currently purchasing services of the WIU for those 32 students. As I said, there is a 7th grade teacher who is speech certified. I would like to move that certified teacher over to the 3rd speech teacher. We obviously have to hire a teacher to replace Mrs. Shrum, but I would like to have 3 speech teachers that would help eliminate some of the excessive caseload for those individuals and hopefully still provide quality services. And I'm not hopefully, I know that we could still provide quality services for our kids needing those speech services. As I had stated last week, you will also see on the agenda the elimination of a learning support position. And I was adamant about that last week. That is in kind of in name only, because we can't have a position that is unstaffed. My recommendation is that that position be converted over to a life skills teacher, because we do, and I went over some of the numbers last week, we do have students that are currently housed in the elementary school that should be over here in the middle school, and I am proposing that we start a middle school's life skills program to assist and address the needs of those students. So those two issues, those four issues kind of go linked hand in hand for two major issues overall. There are budget cuts. I do hear what you are saying about the permanent substitute teachers, the building subs. I tried to address that in making a recommendation in the budget cuts that I placed in the budget, on the agenda. I put back the $5,000 that was allotted for SES, the $2,000 for the middle school, and the $5,000 that was allotted for the high school, to try to meet the current needs of the situations where we have teachers calling off and we need substitute teachers. I did personally talk to every one of those building subs beforehand. I do believe, out of respect, I do have immense respect, and you are correct. Those people that have pointed out the value and virtue of our substitute teachers, they are wonderful individuals, and I assured them that as a district we would make all efforts to make sure that those individuals were called first, even to the point that if we knew ahead of time that a teacher was going to be out, we would have those teachers automatically fill those positions as much as possible. Will there still be shortages of substitute teachers? Yes. It is a pervasive problem across multiple school districts. The factors can range from anywhere to personal reasons why teachers will take off to we've got hit multiple times this year with many teachers, including staff members, that had to take off due to sickness. The flu really cracked us pretty hard this year. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there weren't times where we didn't have substitute teachers, but I do believe that we've made all efforts whatsoever to try to provide substitute teachers as much as possible in the classrooms. So I just, once again, it is my responsibility to make sure that I am providing as much information as possible so that we can make informed, responsible decisions. So that is the rationale, that is the information that I wanted to present to not only to the board, but also to the public this evening. So thank you.
Business manager report.
I echo and agree with the budgetary information and discussions that Mr. Masha and Mr. Patonik and Mr. Porter have given this evening, so thank you.
Were you going to say anything else about the budget or not?
Well, there is nothing more to say. We're held in status here as further decisions are made and waiting for further information from Harrisburg. So,
Okay, pending the decisions about the
Correct,
cuts.
correct.
All right, okay.
Okay. Do you have any more solicited information?
Well, just to try to clarify some things. It took a while, but Mr. Masha and I finally came to understand each other's language, and the resolutions which are before you are to implement what he just described to you. But to get to those results, the resolutions needed to be worded this way. So that's just one point I wanted to make. So I believe we are in harmony. And I'm and unfortunately, sometimes you just have to use words that the statutes and contracts give you, and then go from there. Insofar as the discussion tonight, it was not my intent, and I hope it wasn't taken, that I'm presenting a picture of gloom and doom about this district. I was trying to present the information of how the process for financial recovery works, and to give boundaries and markers and guidelines so that in the event, as the board makes decisions, it has available all the necessary legal information to guide their judgment. And hopefully, having all that information will lead to a much better result in the long run and avoid financial recovery. The use of the term poor school district can mean different things to different people. And I was referring to the way the school district, the way the state does certain calculations and has certain definitions in the school code that then determine the amount of state monies that you receive. In that regard, there are several school districts that would have similar market value income aid ratios. That doesn't mean that they are bankrupt. It doesn't mean that they are without any means at all. It doesn't mean that they are unable to provide education, but rather that their circumstances are more difficult than rich suburban school districts, and that is recognized to some extent in the state funding formula. I will also have to say that that formula is not perfect, and that it hasn't been adjusted adequately over time, in addition to all the other problems that we have. So I just wanted to clarify those points. I know that may seem somewhat technical, but it does mean something to people who have looked at those languages and dealt with it, such as former business managers and former solicitors and current solicitors. So that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
I do want to thank Mr. Protonic for being patient with me. We had multiple conversations over the last week, and I'm quite passionate about the educational end, sometimes not really knowing all the vernacular about the legal end and the school code. And he was very patient with me, and in turn, I also was pretty patient with him. So, Mr. Protonic, thank you very much for working with me.
You're welcome. No old business, moving on to new business. PSBA 2019 Delegate Assembly.
The board hereby approves voting for two PSBA 2019 voting delegates for the Delegate Assembly to be held Friday, October 18th, 2019 in Harrisburg at the PSBA PASA School Leadership Conference. School board nominees are, and open up the floor for nominees.
Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Joe Rhodes.
And a second? Okay, we need another one.
Nominate Jason Polakowski. I respectfully decline. Okay, thank you.
I'll nominate Mr. Carson.
Do I need a motion?
I think you did. Well, you got motions. I think you got to get
Make a motion that we close nominations.
Make a motion, nominations are closed. All in favor or roll call?
Just all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is there a motion to cast an unanimous ballot, directing the secretary to cast an unanimous ballot for Mrs. Rhodes and Mr. Carson?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mrs. Smith.
Mrs. Smith.
You can ask for a voice vote. All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. CWCTC 2019-2020 proposed budget.
The board hereby approves the 2019-2020 proposed budget for Central Westmoreland Career and Technology Center in the amount of $8,496,080. The district's share is $299,811.90. The 2018-2019 district's share in comparison was $307,243.99 for a difference of negative $7,438.09, which is lower than the previous year.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimously.
Blackboard renewal confirmation notice.
The board is asked to approve the renewal confirmation notice with Blackboard to provide SchoolWire software subscription LifePack from 7/1/2019 to 6/30/2020 at a cost of $1,712.08. SchoolWire's web hosting power service from 7/1/2019 to 6/30/2020 at a cost of $5,540.76 for a total renewal amount of $7,252.84.
So be.
Mr. Beistel, second. Mrs. Smith? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Student Services Interagency Agreement.
The board is asked to approve the student service interagency agreement between the school district and the intermediate unit, and this outlines the services provided by the intermediate unit.
Mrs. Rhodes, second. Mrs. Smith? Roll call, please.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Budget cuts.
The board is asked to approve the proposed budget cuts for the 2019-2020 school year.
We'll get a, no, we'll need a motion first.
You need a motion first.
I'll make
That's
the
right.
motion.
Yeah. Mr. Polakowski made the motion. We need discussion first, right? Before
Yes.
we second it.
Before we vote.
Oh, you got the second? Yeah, discussion.
So these cuts here, what I'd like to see, or we really didn't talk about it, and Jim didn't have a report. I'm sure we were 30 days out from, a month away from having a final budget. But I'd like to, these cuts here are all, seem like, don't make sense to me. Seems like we need to what I'd like to see is us put the cuts that we made last year back into the budget and cut again and start from that, because it's like we're 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me that we cut all that stuff last year, we put it back in, or we let it slip back in. And I didn't even realize that until last month, or last week, whenever Bill brought it up. So these cuts here just don't make sense. None of this makes sense to me. I think we need to start where we, as Bill said, like, once a cut, always a cut. How we put them back in there, I don't know. So I can't agree to, voting on these cuts here whenever it's not even comparable to what we cut last year. So that's what my thought is. I'd like to figure out how we can go back to where it was at our starting point from last year.
If I'm not mistaken, Jim, we're not filling those cuts that we did last year. Am I correct or not?
I'm sorry, Ms. Brooke.
The cuts that we made last year, we're not filling them.
No.
Filling.
Filling?
Yeah, filling. We're not filling them.
There is more proposed cuts to come.
These are additional cuts, in addition to the ones that we made last year. And even though you left them in the budget, we're not doing them, Jim.
Right.
That's not what Bill said last week. They were put back in the budget.
The money's not being used, though.
I don't know. All I'm saying is what Bill had said last week, because I didn't have 17's budget or 18's budget, this year's budget. Bill had said they were put back in because he couldn't sleep for 2 days. They were back in there. We need to take them back out. So I don't know if it's in there or not in there.
The team leaders were taken back out.
Everything we cut last year is back out of the budget?
No, we had to add some paper back in because...
It was pretty substantial, right, Bill? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you're the one that detected this.
It's very straightforward that when Jim presented the budget, I was expecting the budget to come in basically around the same amount as the 19 budget, which was $30,400,000, $30,500,000. When it came in at $31,500,000, that's when it threw me into a tizzy. How could we go? That means in 1 year our expenses are going up $1.6 million. Especially in an austere time, our costs normally go up $750,000. I couldn't figure it out. I thought I could go through the budget and find it. It's a large number. I thought maybe, but I couldn't find it. So it was a bunch of things that were cut before that had to have been added back in, which people have agreed that's what happened.
Yeah, well, we can't do that.
Well, I don't know if you can't do it. Why would you do it 1 year? I've never seen it before, but there's a lot of things since I've been here I haven't seen before, so.
Don't we just need to do, Bill, take that money out of the budget?
Well, what they're...
Because we're not filling them.
Well, what it's saying to me is those, to get through the 18-19 year, they made these cuts were made. I'm not blaming anyone. These cuts were made, but they're saying, well, we'll live with it for a year, but we really need these we really need these things. And so they went back in the budget. That's how I'm looking at it.
But the money's not being spent to fill them.
No, because they were supposedly cut. But, and I'm surmising this because I really didn't talk to anyone specifically about it, but if they were cut for 1 year, they're saying, well, we'll live without these things for a year, but we're going to put them back in because we really need them in the long run. I'm surmising that's because I've never run into this situation before.
That's not what we voted on. We voted to take them out, period. The fact that they left the money in the budget needs to have the money taken out of the budget, which would help the budget, because we're not going to fill those positions. We had no intention of making them just a temporary or a one-time, one-year thing.
The only thing that I'm aware of that they ran into trouble with was paper and postage, because we cut that.
Copy machine usage.
Yeah, like the copy machine.
And there's I mean, it's been said here multiple times that kids didn't have Kleenexes. You know, so we had to make cuts of things that are necessary. I mean, we are still a school. We do still have to have papers and pencils and make copies, and we still have postage. Our postage was drastically cut. We couldn't even send out necessary information to parents to keep them informed because we didn't have necessary postage. So some things had to be put back in.
Well, I know are the numbers, okay? And Jim gave me a list of cuts that amount to 1.1 million. And 300 of that was in hardcore costs, 4 teachers eliminated, okay? The other 800,000 is what I refer to as soft open cost, you know, not dealing with personnel. And they were across the board in every category. I'm assuming that 800,000, most of that come back into the 20 budget, because I can't explain why our costs would go up $1.6 million in 1920. When you know, especially when we're working at being austere.
So what do we need to do? Make a motion that we take that money back out of the budget? We're not using it to fill what we cut last year, so why would it stay in the budget?
Because we under budgeted some of those items.
I didn't bring that list, but you know, Jim, you have it. You gave me a copy of it. That's when you had to make all those cuts on the 27th of June. Is that correct? You were told to?
Board docs from that June 28th meeting, because that was presented that night.
So I'm surmising that's what happened, because I can't explain why our costs are going to go up 1.6 million. I can't explain it.
Well, you know, the only way to do it is, I mean, if we're not going to take it completely out, then we need to split hairs and put 5.5 million back, or half of that, 500,000 back into the budget. We cannot go backwards. We just can't. We cut it. It was cut. That's it. So if we're going to keep it in, we need to come to some common ground here. That, like, if we need extra paper, let's put a couple $100,000 in for extra paper, and that's it. Nip it and be done with it. We can't go backwards because it's just we're not. I didn't even look at these cuts.
The same thing that we're doing now. We're going to cut these positions or whatever it is we're cutting here on the screen to come back next year and say the money's still in the budget, but we can.
Yeah,
we still might take a look at it, even though that's not what we want. If we're taking them out, we need to take the money out.
Yeah, they got to stay out. And I didn't bring it with me, but I guess I heard through the rumor mill that we are bringing back all the substitute coaches and salaries. We're taking that back on again.
We can remove.
I mean, is that in there?
I do believe it is.
Yeah.
Team leaders and assistant coaches.
Okay, now,
But we haven't filled any of those positions.
No.
We haven't expended the money.
but we're budgeted for it, Ken.
Yeah, so what do we need to do tonight to take care of what I thought we took care of last year? We need to make a motion that those things be taken and put back out of the budget?
There's $1.1 million in cuts last year that's back in the budget.
Right, but we need to find a way to take it back out because we're not expending the money.
We just take it back out.
Well, is it that simple? We make a motion that those cuts...
Jim, you have anything to add to this?
...are permanent.
We already have a motion on the floor. We got to talk about this motion here.
That's a valid point.
I have a comment about the building subs. So it looks like if every building is their permanent subs getting removed, does that mean they were never used? I don't understand.
No, they were used.
Okay, so that line item is just going to be used for calling in a sub. I mean, it's just that money, that $26,000 for each building. I mean, if we use them, we're taking it out of this line item, but then it's going to go back to the.
Jim, help me out. Did we not put additional monies in for Source for Teachers? If I remember correctly on our budget, say for instance.
Yes, when you and I walked through that detailed budget, that's correct.
We did put additional monies in where it says, like the 10, 1100, 329 account there. We did add additional monies into that to help beef up the need for having additional substitute teachers in there.
I'm just not sure that I understand. We use them, but we're
Were they
taking them
used
out.
every day?
But
Like, what
then
was
we're beefing up another
Some
line
capacity
item
or another.
to support that. You know, we're just sort of taking it out of here and putting it in another area.
What would that save us? Does that, like, I need a number of, like, what that would save us if we eliminated that job, but we still need it? Like, what kind of savings?
Well, we put additional monies in for the substitute teachers. I don't have my budget book with me. I think it was 5,000, 25,000, 30. We put additional monies in for each school.
So is that going to go, the money that you're putting in for each school, is that going to go to,
Help offset any additional staffing needs if a teacher calls off. Bring substitute teacher.
so basically, we're going to move the building sub money just over to ESS?
I'm sorry, I was...
The 4 building subs, that money's going to go then to ESS because we're still going to need them.
We did put additional monies in the columns up above. I'll take those out. I mean, whatever the board directs me to do, I will do. But we did put additional monies in on the 10 and 1100, 329 accounts to hopefully offset the demand for paying substitute teachers.
Is that on the first page of the budget book where it's going into? Just so I can look. 'cause
You have the 1100 accounts here, Mr. Polakowski. That's page 41, Mr. Polakowski. I think it actually starts on page 40. At SPC, there was originally $25,000 that was put in for sub-teacher service. Additional $5,000 was added to that. At SES, there was $45,000 that was put in. An additional $25,000 was added. At SMS, it started there was $40,000, an additional $35,000 was added to that.
It's outside professional service instead of salaries. Not that much.
And I do believe at the high school, it started out at $45,000 and an additional $35,000 was added to that.
Okay.
Not to put anyone on the spot, but Mr. Marnell, that is, I mean, we did add those additional monies into there for that.
Yes, that was because the past history has indicated that we were utilizing source for teacher substitutes at a greater rate than what we were budgeting. So we're trying to play catch-up with the expenditure line item. Now, embedded in with each school building, in the past it was decided, not by me, but by the administrative group to embed a full day source for teachers substitute in each building. So rather than somebody being called in because of a particular absence, a person showed up every day, at least one of them. I don't know how many there are. So what you were proposing here was to eliminate at least one of those permanent daily source for teachers subs from each building. And of course, the additional money was the fact that there's a lot of absences, and the weekly bills that come in are sometimes makes us shake our heads in the business office. But teachers have a right to be absent. There's there's time in their contracts, sick days, personal days, whatever, for them to take off. And they fill in through the computer system, the source for teachers, and a call or message is sent out to the various substitutes for those particular areas. So it's a guesstimating game each season, trying to guesstimate how much will be utilized from source for teachers, and that's the truth. I don't make that. I don't assign substitute teachers, but I do have to try to guesstimate how much to budget for this district. So yes, there was monies added because we're trying to play catch up with that expenditure line. Now, how you minimize the amount of absences that are taken, that's beyond my scope and purview to assist you with. How do you do that? I don't know. And of course, there is a shortage of substitute teachers, not only in this area, but in this state and probably nationwide. You're in competition for substitute teachers, and you're utilizing a service. Now, they call themselves ESS now, but when this concept first came up, and I think that was in the 12-13 school year, when the intermediate unit invited, I don't know what the parent name of the company was, but there were two subdivisions. There was Source for Teachers, which provided substitute teachers, and then there was the one called Mission One that provided support service staff and substitutes there, personal care assistants, janitorial, etc. And we didn't utilize that Source for Teachers. My first year was 13-14, my second year was 14-15, so I think Jack brought them in to you, and I think you started utilizing them for the 15-16 school year, if I recall correctly. But
Mr. Corson, and I'll address this to the board. I can take that list from last year, and I'll gladly go back and rework and show you, where we stand using that comparison to that list. I will sit down with my administrative team. I asked that possibility if a couple board members would sit down with us so that we can understand what the circumstances are.
And several times during the year, Mr. Mash has asked me for an up-to-date printout from the accounting system. Where do we stand with, budget for Source for Teachers versus actual? So we were running pretty tight. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Mash, the 10-1100 category, the 329, whatever it is, I'm not sure what that is. No cuts to that one? What is that category?
The one where there are zeros?
Yeah.
Last week I had proposed that we place cuts in there, and I put those back in. I just wanted to be completely open and show that I had placed those back in there.
What category is that?
Can I explain the numbers?
Yeah.
The boring accounting numbers.
Yeah, please do.
10 stands for general fund.
Okay.
The next number, 1100, stands for regular elementary and secondary education. 329 is an object code for purchasing professional services. Now, the zeros you can disregard. The 10 is elementary level, and 210 is primary center. 220 is the elementary school, 500 is this building, the middle school, and 800 is the high school. Now, there's an error in the typing here. The number for the high school should be 30-800, 30 meaning the secondary level, and then right above that, the middle school level, it should be a 20-500, 20 meaning middle school. So those accounting numbers, they come from our Bible here, the State Chart of Accounts. Bill's very familiar with that. So, you know, we have to make our general ledger fit the mandated account. So that's what that number means.
But I just was curious why there was no cuts to it.
Well, as Mr. Masha stated in the detailed budget book, within that particular page where those accounts are, we had added money in because the existing budget for that, like you said, you add money back to the budget that you had approved last year. Well, you remember, you know, the budget you have is the foundation for the next budget you build. So we look at actual numbers. And of course, the actual numbers exceeded the budget numbers. Again, there's a lot of usage for substitute teachers. So we have to try to keep up with that line item.
I remember you saying that last year.
Yes.
You know, the budget this year is the foundation for next year, but then we sort of contradict ourselves by putting all the money back in, so it's really the foundation.
You know, what I would suggest, what I would suggest is that, you know, we should have, and maybe we should schedule an actual walkthrough that book. It wouldn't hurt anybody, I think, to have a walkthrough of that detailed book. And I know Mr. Pushkar, we talked about how to upload that big book. It's a rather lengthy document, and there's a minimum number of pages that you can scan through the office copier. But you know, he said we could scan it in pieces, and then he could fit it together on the website. I even sent one section today as a test for Mr. Masha and Mr. Botonic and Mr. Pushkar to look at. As a test, I resorted the budget book by these building numbers. So, and I put a cover page. This is the budget for, I forget which one I uploaded today. High school. I uploaded the one for the high school, which included, of course, a cover page with a little index on it. And then the first front pages were the actual building level budget that was submitted to us. And then following that are those dry pages out of that budget book. So it's all coded with each building. And I thought maybe that would help everybody if you looked at each building's budget individually. And of course, we would also upload that full budget so that, you know, there's full disclosure. But it wouldn't hurt to have a walkthrough because you have questions, and that's good. And at least with each page in front of you, and you've had those books at home, and I'm sure you've marked them with questions and, you know, yellow Post-it notes. You know, we could talk through any of those individual questions. I'm certainly down for that. I think we did that one year. It was rather dry and long-winded, but we went through each page. But I know Mr. Alton remembers that. So yeah, we'd be glad to do that again.
Jim and Vince, I gave you a list of proposed cuts after I analyzed the budget. Did you guys get to review those? Have you analyzed those?
We are.
Yes, we are analyzing those, yes.
And where are you at on it?
Well, you know, Mr. Masha and I have to come to, I guess, an opinion on them, and then maybe sit down with you, or I guess with the whole school board, on what our findings are. I mean, there are obviously cuts that you propose on here, like I told Mr. Masha. I simply marked, I can live with these. But, you know, there are some that, like your pension cut, I can live with that one.
Okay.
Now, there were some cuts, or there were some cuts that Mr. Mash had proposed that you said, no, I guess I don't agree with those. I want to add them back in. Again, that's not for, you know,
But that came out to only $12,000. I was coming out with TRA.
Yeah, I don't have your sheet
You're
with
down
me.
to 196. But the first three items are no-brainers. They come straight from fund balance. That's proper accounting for those.
Well, now, wait a minute. Now, like Mr. Patonic is cautioning us, and I agree with that caution, that one, you know, proper budgeting is you have to have those included in your expenditure accounts because you are going to expend the money. But your point is correct too. It's your decision on how you want to pay for those. Now, for example, the budgetary reserve account, It's a strictly what that is. It's not an actual expenditure item, but it's an account like we did this year that we transfer monies to the actual expenditure line item. Some things that were added back in during the year. Now, the one on the key fob upgrade, that 52,000 is over in those detail pages. 25,000 covering it is over here on the revenue pages. So you're not really cutting it, you're actually funding it, and then we just got notification of an additional Safe Schools grant, I think it's called, or SAFE, that I have to print out and digest. And part of our future budget update, obviously for the proposed final budget, I got to now put on the revenue side that additional revenue source. So I think between the two grants, that key fob program is going to be paid for. Expenditures out, revenue in.
Is that the 52,000?
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay, so that's a no-brainer.
Right.
The 80,000 for refund of prior year receipts, I hardly ever had that.
Well, we did have one, I don't know if it was
You had a big one in 16 for
That's it.
251,000.
We had like over $200,000 one.
Right, but
hit us.
that's rare.
Well, I agree that it's rare, but, you know, when
But it's a prior year receipt. It has nothing to do with our present operating. So in essence, the fund balance is already reduced by 80,000 if that comes to fruition.
Well,
Okay?
your
The
payment-
budgetary reserve.
Your payment of a tax refund will come out of your cash.
Right.
It doesn't come out of fund balance, it actually comes out of cash, and you have to have a budget line item for making payments of prior year
Well,
receipts.
you can do it there, or you can take it against the present tax receipt.
Well, I don't agree with that. Taking
But
it against-
it's of no difference. We're talking semantics.
This is true.
I'm saying...
It's accounting methodology.
Yeah, these three things have very little, if any, bearing, as far as I'm concerned, on the present budget. And then I had the 208,000, Vince has got it down to 196. I analyzed the transportation, talked to Laura several times. I don't know, Charlie, you may disagree, I don't know. But I'm finding the budget's about 100,000 over what we're actually going to expend this year and the following year. Health benefits, I'm coming up with 75,000 less. That's up to you, Jim. You agreed on the PESERs of 50.
Understood.
And all the others are soft costs that I analyzed from years before. I tried to stick with things that didn't directly affect the educational process.
Now, it is
So we got to sit down and we got to get together, and because I'm tired of spinning wheels. I'm not used to this.
May I make a recommendation that you, Mr. Marnell, and I sit down as soon as possible?
Yeah, I'll give you dates, okay? Because I'm going to be tied up.
Because I too believe, I too feel that we're spinning wheels right now.
Hey, Charlie, do me a favor. Check the budget number. I could give that to you and see where you're operating now. Because I analyzed it. I've talked to Laura several times.
We've been looking at what you said, we've been going over that. We feel pretty comfortable with at least 75, one student coming back into the district. Maybe we have to run to Pittsburgh every day next year as special needs kid, that's the one we're
Okay.
But we're looking to eliminate at least another big bus. Who knows if we can do a couple of the other smaller ones. But I feel pretty confident with at least 75 now. And it might be a little.
Yeah, I feel you're going to be under by 100,000 this year to what the budget says.
Variables always have run if we don't know it's coming.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, and when you talk about variables, okay, I'll tell you the time period where I sweated bullets, and Laura would know this. Last 2 weeks of July, first 2 weeks of August. Anyone know why? That's when families move. and they move during that time period to get their kids registered in the district they're moving into. And that's when, you know, your budget's passed, it's been done, and that's when you find out. That's the time period your biggest changes will affect that budget. It could work against you, and it can work for you. But that time period, I always sweated bullets because I always worried about what Charlie was saying. You just don't know what's going to come in, what's going to happen. But being an austere year, I think, I refuse to cut teachers, so I'll live with a $100,000 cut in transportation. That's my thinking.
Well,
I'm trying to stick with the things that don't affect education directly.
I make a recommendation that we table the budget cuts and get a little more information, and
Yeah.
maybe until after they meet.
Next 2 weeks.
Yeah, next week.
Anybody else?
I feel that way myself.
Listen to you.
Until this thing is thrown straight.
Mr. Carson makes a motion to table the budget
I
cut.
think you have to do something with the motion.
Yeah, the motion's on the floor.
I mean, if
Oh.
it dies for a second, then that would be okay, right?
Very good, yes.
Supersedes
Well-
the motion on the floor.
Are we talking about all
Yes.
cuts?
Well, for right now, I'd say.
So, everyone.
Someone would have to make a motion to table.
Just number 5.
Okay.
We got a second from, or first from Mr. Carson, somebody seconded the table?
We're tabling number 5, the budget cuts.
What's the language I need to use, Dave, to rescind my motion or whatever?
Well, you don't need to. I mean, you can take a motion. You can either withdraw your motion with support of the other person, or we can have a motion to table.
We have a motion.
I just
to
made
table.
a
have a
motion
motion
so we
to
could get it
table.
on the floor so we could discuss it.
Okay, so
So
do we have a second to the table?
I'll second it.
All right. Now, I just want to give you one point of information. You're here tonight, we're here next week. So next week becomes kind of a big decision night. And then, so as to allow some time to get to a proposed final budget the following week. And the complications, which I realized last year more fully, is that the more changes, the more calculations have to be made as to how it affects millage in the 2 counties. And ultimately, to send in the form to Harrisburg, and for even your own information, you probably would like to know those numbers. So, I'm just trying to lay that timeline out for you, that there's a whole lot of decision-making to be made between now and May 23rd. So I hope the 2 meetings are enough, I guess is what I'm saying.
Should we think about a special meeting after the 23rd for budget only to pass the final budget?
Well, at that point, you've already got your proposed preliminary budget up. I mean, you can still cut it, but I guess that's up to you. I sort of see that as going backwards, but that's up to you.
The biggest thing is I haven't seen any cuts. There's no cuts to the budget. I mean, so I think we have to, I mean, right, Jim? I mean,
There have been cuts to the budget.
we put the cuts from last year back in, so now we're just sort of backtracking a little bit, so we have little cuts.
Not true, we didn't just take $1 million.
Sure you did.
No, we didn't.
The thing that we just tabled was 196,000 in cuts
But,
right
you know,
there.
if we don't pass the
And we
proposed
tabled it,
final
so-
on May 23rd, and you schedule another meeting
guys
for
want
it,
to
then
table
that
it?
puts you against the June, the The technical deadline is June 30th, which is a Sunday, and then Saturday is June 29th.
Well,
We have June 27th is the...
I'm being selfish, okay, because as soon
27th
as I
is
can meet would be the week of the 23rd. You know what I'm saying?
The 23rd is currently advertised as the night you're going to pass your proposed
Yeah, I know
final
that,
budget.
but the problem I have, it's my problem. I can't meet with you guys till the week of the 23rd, which the soonest would be Monday, Thursday's the board meeting. You know what I'm saying?
Monday would be good.
So you can't be here at next week's meeting, is what you're saying, the
Yes.
16th.
Could we set the Monday, that Monday?
Anytime.
Is tomorrow not available?
Pardon?
Is tomorrow not available?
Nah.
So when we say we're meeting again?
Well, we have a meeting next week on Thursday. Now, what more voting items do we have for next week that we're not on this week's?
The regular voting meeting, the regular business.
We kind of voted through a lot of regular business
You didn't
stuff.
cover everything and...
Well, not everything, but...
You know, but you didn't cover everything, and I think the point that may be being lost here is that these cuts are what is being proposed by the superintendent. It doesn't mean that you can't come up with more cuts. But decisions do need to start being made at some level, whether you're going to do it or not. Logically, I'm just speaking logically, that's all. Or maybe there aren't any others to be made. I don't know. I don't know.
Ken, do you agree? I mean, we need to have that starting point of where we cut last year. That's the starting point. How's that? Why is that? Why can't I get that through my head? Can someone explain that?
I can't either. We cut it, but the money's still there.
Yeah, I mean,
Take that money out and it reduces our deficit.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that not correct?
what is so hard about that? Why can't? Can someone explain that to me? Why we can't?
I mean, then we go on to these cuts.
Yeah, and then we make progress.
Because the next year, at this time, we'll be looking at the ones from last year, and then the ones from this year that are still in, but not being filled.
And believe me, I give kudos to Bill for finding this. Like, this would just completely just took my knees out had I known that this was all put back in there. Because I'm not looking at 2 years worth of budgets at the same time. Like, it's just not 1 year's enough. To think that everything we cut last year was put back in, I just can't get over it. I'm just dumbfounded. I'm just completely taken by that.
And I'm surmising that's what happened, Jim. Because
I mean, I took it as gospel.
I can't believe.
Please quit referring to this as my budget. It's not my budget. I assist the superintendent and the school board in compiling a budget. You know, quit saying, Jim, your budget.
It's not your budget, Jim, but
It's
the
not my
money got
budget.
put back in.
It's not budget.
I helped the administration,
This is the district
superintendent,
budget.
and the administration compile a budget. Now, you're making a generalized statement that is not accurate.
May I
In
ask? a question?
totality. Now, what is accurate is when we go through, walking through each page, I'll be glad to point out the items that helped increase the budget. For example, all the employees that are still existing in that had pay jumps. Teachers, administrators, secretaries, so on and so forth. So there's a reason why the budget increases. The pension that's tied to all those employees. There's a new pension rate for next year. That's another reason why the budget increased. You have an ERIP payment that has to be made for this new group. That's a big addition to the budget. So, a general statement is, well, you just threw $1 million back in, Jim. Well, no, Jim didn't throw in $1 million worth of cuts back in. Now, each budget stands alone on itself. We take what's in our system, we bring over all those employees at their new pay rates. This comes right out of the personnel module. The contracts are in there. So what teacher A makes this year, teacher A will be making this next year at that step, so on and so forth. So that's all brought over, and you see the names in the detailed budget. So that's not made up numbers. Now then, the calculations for Social Security on that is in there, and retirement, and health insurance, and dental, and vision, and life insurance. So all those embedded fixed costs, if you will, all increase. So that's all part of the budgetary increase from one year to the next. Were some items that were cut last year asked to be put back in for the draft? Well, yes. The team leadership money was added back in. That was 16 positions at $2,500 each. Now that's in section 1100-131, I believe. On that page, I didn't bring that book with me, but I can show you exactly where that's in there. The coaches that were cut, I was asked to put those back in to the athletic department, the $3,250. That's another example of cuts that were made that was asked to be put back into the draft budget for reconsideration. Doesn't mean they have to.
When do we reconsider, Jim?
Well, right now, you have the book, and you reconsider them, and you say to Mr. Masha and the administration, we don't want them.
But that reconsideration should be something to the effect that, we failed to be able to fill those, or we should be filling those positions, so let's have a motion to fill the positions and allot the money. We've allotted the money and not filled the positions, and that's not what we wanted last year. We wanted the money taken out, so...
Well, the money was taken out of the...
No, it's still in the budget.
No, it was
What do you
taken out...
mean it's no?
It was taken out of the 18-19 budget, which we are in now. But the decision internally was made to put that amount of money for those coaches that were cut back into this
How
draft.
can somebody just do that without our approval?
Well, I follow orders. Don't yell at me. I
I'm
follow
not yelling
orders.
at anybody. It's just beyond my comprehension.
Mr. Rowe.
We cut all these things out, and I expect that when I come the next year, they're still on. Not the money left for them, and the position's not filled.
I understand that.
Mr.
Yes,
Rowe.
Mr. Masha.
I will assume responsibility for that, because if we were looking at starting this whole entire budget process and having early conversations, I wanted us to have these conversations. Somebody asked, well, what is the significance of team leaders and assistant coaches? I thought the whole entire process was for us to take a look at this book and come together and try to work towards a consensus amongst the board and the administration. I thought that was the entire purpose of the budget process.
That is true, but I just don't understand how you take something out, but you don't take it out.
Last year it was taken out.
You should be coming to us and saying, you know what, I think we need those coaches or we need those team leaders. And then we will consider that and tell you whether you can or can't have that. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, Mr. Masha.
And I know you're not.
I just cannot comprehend that money still being in an account that we said no to. Take it out of the budget. Doesn't that reduce our budget deficit?
It will. And I was not a part of the final budget process last year, but I do believe, and correct me if I am wrong, but I do believe last year there are duplicate proposals of monies that was. Am I wrong? I do believe that at one point the administration proposed a whole set of cuts, and then there was another proposal that was duplicate of those cuts. So in essence, we were double cutting accounts.
I'm not sure I follow any of that.
Well,
You're right, Mr. Masha, because we had meetings with Dr. Molnar among us going through, coming up with a list of cuts to present to the school board, and Dr. Molnar did do that.
I think the best way to solve this, table this, he said you can get with him, you guys get together on the 23rd, we have a meeting on that Thursday and come back with an answer.
I agree.
I mean, we're going to keep going around the table 14 times.
And I think when you come back, not only do we have to look at these cuts and make these cuts, but we have to make sure that the money's taken out for the ones that we did last year. So I think all got to be combined into one thing that cures this problem, so that next year we don't come back and have previous years' money still on the books and not have positions filled because we thought we might want to have them. Take them out the way the board votes, or leave them in if the board votes that way. Take them out, leave the money out of it, and if we need to go back and fill those positions, then we'll have to find the money to pay for it somewhere.
Okay. Moving on to number 6. Curtailment or alteration of the middle school reading program.
You're going to need to read the resolution. The
1 and 2. Okay.
the lengthy ones, yeah.
After superintendent giving the report and makes recommendation of a curtailment or alteration and makes the recommendation to the school board listing the specific educational program eligible to be reduced or eliminated and the reasons justifying such, including any of the following which apply as to each program. To conform with standards of organization or educational activities required by law or recommended by Department of Education. Programs. Eliminate the reading program classes at the middle school, resulting in elimination of reading class teaching positions at the following grade levels. 6th, 7th, and 8th reading, consisting of 2 full-time and 1 half-time day positions. Reorganized by allocating the subject matter as follows, in which I had already reported.
So your report's incorporated by reference.
Yes. Whereas the superintendent has given a report recommending programs for curtailment or alteration as a result of, to conform with standards of organization or educational activities required by law or recommended by Department of Education, which will result in the elimination of certain programs in their classes, and the Board of School Directors concurs with his findings in the report, which are to be part of the public record and are incorporated into this resolution by reference. Whereas the curtailment of these programs will result in either A, the suspension furlough of the necessary number of tenured professional employees pursuant to Section 1124A2 of the Public School Code of 1949 as amended by Act Number 55 of 2017, Act of November 6, 2017, PL 1142, number 55, and B, the termination of the contract of employment of a temporary professional employee, non-tenured, effective at the completion of the last day of school for the 2018-2019 school year, hereby set as June 7, 2019.
You have another page.
Pardon?
You have another page.
I'm getting, I was scrolling down.
Okay, I'm sorry, but just to be clear that you omitted the phrase, including specifically if the course is not a required course. Am I correct that reading is not required at the middle school level?
It is not.
Thank you.
Be it resolved that the Board of School Directors hereby accepts the report of the superintendent and does eliminate the program classes herein and concurs with the findings for cause of suspension under Section 1124A2 of the above cited statute in order to conform with standards of organization or educational activities required by law or recommended by Department of Education, including specifically that the courses is not a required course, reading grades 6, 7, and 8. Number 2, the Board of School Directors hereby authorizes the suspension of the necessary number of professional employees as a result of curtailment or alteration of the educational program of the Southmoreland School District as to the following programs and numbers of professional employees. A, 6th, 7th, and 8th reading consisting of 2 full-time and 1 half-day positions. B, reorganized by allocating the subject matter as follows in the report that I presented. If there are no professional employees in one or more set positions, but rather temporary professional employees, which it determines in this case then their contracts are not to be renewed and they are terminated effective at the close of business on the last day of the 2018-2019 school year, hereby set as June 7th, 2019. And the board president and secretary are authorized and directed to give him, her, them written notice that the above is a reason for the non-renewal of the contract for temporary professional employees, and to notify said temporary professional employee of the right to the local agency hearing if requested by the employee, as to which it determines that there are no tenured professional employees currently serving. Number 3, the superintendent is authorized and directed to post notification of all curtailments or alterations on the internet website, and B, notify the Department of Education of the actions taken pursuant to School Code Section 1124A2. C, determine the appropriate professional employees whose contracts are not to be renewed and who will be terminated effective as of the above stated date, and provide a notice of and have termination hearings before the superintendent, and therefore, if found eligible to not renew and eligible to terminate the temporary professional contract of a temporary professional employee, cause to be prepared the notice of intent to suspend or be signed by the school board president and secretary, unless the temporary professional employee timely requests a hearing before the school board, and D, if after considering positions being otherwise vacated and newly created positions, whether before or after this resolution, it is still necessary to suspend one or more professional employees, then determine the appropriate professional employees to be suspended in the nature of a furlough, not a dismissal, as required by seniority, and provide them with a notice of intent to suspend, including the right to timely request a hearing before the school board pursuant to the local agency law 2 PACS 101 et sec. And E, provide written notice to the affected employee or employees no later than 60 days prior to the start of the 2019-2020 school year of the elimination of the program. I think I got everything right.
Yes, thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Go ahead, Ken.
I'll make that.
Mr. Second?
Second.
Mr. Polakowski? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smith? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Creation of a district-wide speech position.
Be it resolved that the Southmoreland School Board authorizes and directs that the board, number 1, the board authorizes the elimination of one half-time speech position services with Westmoreland Intermediate number 7, WIU 7, effective at the close of the current school year, June 7, 2019, and directs the superintendent to notify WIU 7 thereof with a certified copy of this resolution. And number 2, the board authorizes the creation of one full-time speech position for Southmoreland School District beginning with the 2019-2020 school year, and ratifies posting and advertising if needed for this position.
I'll make that motion.
Second? Mrs. Rhodes? Roll call, please.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Elimination of learning support position due to retirement.
Be it resolved that the school board hereby eliminates one special education learning support teacher position from the 2 retiring special education learning support teachers effective end of business on June 7, 2019.
Motion? Mr. Carson, second. Mrs. Smith? Roll call, please.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Carson?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith?
Pass.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
Life skills position.
Be it resolved that the board authorizes the creation of one full-time special education life skills position at Southmoreland Middle School effective for the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year, and authorizes and directs and ratifies posting and advertising if needed therefore.
I'm sorry, it's initially at the middle school, so you have authority in the event that circumstances change.
Oh, I'm sorry. Small print, my eyes are getting. Initially at the middle school.
The motion?
So be it.
Mr. Beistel, second. Mr. Fry? Roll call, please.
Mr. Carson? Yes. Mr. Fry? Yes. Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Motion carries 9 unanimous.
There's no personnel.
No.
Citizens' comments?
I just want to make sure that I understand. We just furloughed a teacher, correct? Is that what just occurred?
No, you initiated the process of giving authority for that to potentially happen if it's needed. However, the plan which the superintendent discussed in great detail should obviate that need.
Okay, so
No, wait, Mrs. Williams, I'm not sure I understand what, we are furloughing a temporary employee. is
No,
it?
you're not. You're terminating the contract of a temporary employee. Temporary employees are not entitled to furlough.
okay, so she lost her job. A teacher lost their job. I just want to be clear. Is that correct?
Non-tenured
A what?
person-
I'm
A
sorry.
non-tenured teacher
So that doesn't.
will lose their contract.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so somebody did lose their job this evening. I just want to make sure everybody was
Yes.
aware of that.
That is correct.
So I have a couple questions about the reading program because I don't know who understands what about Title I, and that Title I is a reading program that supports our students through 5th grade. Once they hit 5th grade, 6th grade, there's no longer Title I. So I'm assuming that's where this reading program came into play. So my question would be, how many children are in a reading classroom? Do we know that number? Like, how many children do we support at one time in a reading classroom?
It would be, depending on the grade level, but an average classroom, 25.
So we're still going to be able to support them at the same level within a typical classroom.
Within the ELA classroom, yeah.
I'm not sure that I believe that. So going back to the building subs, do we know how many days in the school year each permanent building sub was used? Because I think that's a very important question, but nobody has still really given an answer to that.
And I will try to, in clarification, used in a teaching capacity or used in just general? Because probably they're used every day in some capacity. I would probably say about 90% of the time or greater as a substitute in a classroom.
I just think we still run the risk of those building subs not being available when we need people. I'm just saying. So I have an important question, and I'd like an answer to it, and maybe Mr. Marnell can answer this, or maybe somebody that has the budget book in front of them. I would like to know what the increases are for 1920 for non-union employees. So I'm talking administration. Every single administrator in this district, every single secretary, every single non-union employee. Is there a number quickly that somebody could give me?
Not quickly, but we can derive that number back
Okay,
at
so-
the business office.
So if you had to guess, what number would we be looking at? Because I'm going to assume
Oh,
that...
Mrs. Williams, I would hate to guess and have
Okay, so
have a
are we
wrong
talking...
number. I'd like to be accurate with that.
Okay, so are we
For
talking...
everyone's sake.
Are we talking maybe 100,000? Are we talking maybe 200,000? What I'm getting at is I am sick and tired of coming here and cutting from the bottom, which affects our kids directly. So my proposal would be that every non-union employee takes a pay freeze, because we have to start somewhere much larger than $2,500.
Courtney Hodge, I'm a resident in Hunker. I wasn't actually going to come up and speak tonight, but after what I just witnessed tonight, I don't know how anybody could not be here speaking. We go from one extreme to the other. We go from you guys dealing with this budget for how long now, and you're still up here arguing about it and you don't know heads from tails right now, but yet you're sure about these cuts, especially to special education, and now transportation was mentioned. You guys are already cutting transportation for these kids. What is going on here? Why don't you guys have this worked out before tonight? Your final budget is due in what, 2 weeks?
That's not final, that's the temporary, that's the proposed final budget. The
Your
final budget's
proposed
the end
final
of June.
budget.
The final budget's the
And
end
you
of June.
guys are still arguing about what's in the budget right now and what's not in the budget. Why? We have a right to know. You guys don't even list specifics for us to look at as citizens. Nothing. I grew up in Latrobe. I went to a school 3 times the size of this one. So you know what I did? I looked at their budget. I know it's going to be much, much larger than this one. I get it. It's $56 million for Latrobe's budget. You guys are only 20 million, 22 million less than their budget. Why is that? What are you guys spending this on? We don't know. You guys don't even know. I don't understand why you guys don't know what you're spending money on. Has anybody ever asked, why are these prices so high? Why are we spending this much? Has anybody asked that question? Why? Or are you guys just looking at this totality and saying, oh, guess we need to cut special education now? This is ridiculous. I can't even believe you guys are a school board.
I just have 2 questions. I just have 2 questions, and if you would answer them honestly, I would greatly appreciate it, and I think everyone here tonight would appreciate it. For the past 4 years, have you been instituting budget cuts?
I can't
We
hear
can't
you.
hear you.
Test. Okay. For the past 4 years, have you been instituting budget cuts?
Instituting? Budget cuts? Yeah.
So you have been. Has the budget gotten better? Is that an I don't know? The questions were, has the second one, has the budget gotten better? Has the deficit decreased by your efforts?
Yes, because of the cuts.
That's not what I saw in his packet. From what I understood from his packet that you all seem to agree with, the deficits have almost doubled consistently year by year.
We have an operating deficit of $1 million. That's where it's at. Started in 17, operated a $1 million loss, another $1 million loss in 18, and basically that's where we're at, but that's where we're whittling down. And personnel's taking a hit. We're a service-oriented business. That's where the money's at.
Has what you've been doing working, though? We're still without
When you
tissues.
say working, are people happy with the cuts? Hell no.
Has it
No
been?
one's happy with cuts. But it's going to take a combination of cuts and tax increases. period. It's very simple. It's a matter of simple numbers. It really is.
All right.
Did you agree to table the budget cuts, number 5?
Yes.
But then we still made budget cuts? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So what budget cuts were we tabling? I'm literally confused. Because if we didn't have enough.
Can you give her a list?
There was a list.
Okay, I saw that.
Number 5.
But wasn't some of these things part of that list? Is that not taken into account?
They weren't on that.
No, they're not on.
So
the
that's an additional
Yes.
cutting? Okay. So I guess I just don't understand, if you didn't feel like you had enough information for the first part of the budget, how you knew the second part of the budget was going to work. My second thing is, last year, when you were talking about the different budgets that were presented, there were multiple budgets. There was a blue, ivory, purple, canary, pink, white, and Mrs. Love, you had your own special budget, like as a sample. On the PTA Facebook page, it does have that on June 28th that you passed the purple budget. And we actually have pictures of all of them on the PTA page if you need to reference them at all. But there were things that, and Mr. Marnell said this last week, that he was told to put back in. And I think that's where the confusion is, and I believe it's where it's coming from back here, is that last week he said, I didn't put them in, I was told to put them back in. So I think that's where the confusion is, because in that budget, in the purple budget, we're cutting all the assistant coaches and cutting after-school tutoring and the team leaders and all those things. So I think that's where the confusion is he's saying he was told to take them out, and I am implying that the board's saying we never voted to put them back in. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other citizens' comments? Motion to adjourn? Mrs. Smith, second. Mrs. Rhodes, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting adjourned.